Beethoven. But it's just Bakugou telling Eri to kill herself. By Mentally Papaya, voiced by AngstEater to assist reading. Chapter 2. Courage! Stop breaking the fucking window! Eri was stubborn when it came to where she stayed, as it turns out. She didn't want to leave the Bakugou residence. She also, as it turned out, wasn't too keen on Katsuki leaving, or Katsuki literally telling anyone else about her. She didn't trust adults, and no matter how much Katsuki defended Aizawa or All Might as capable heroes that would keep her safe, she was adamant that Katsuki was the only one who she wanted to stay with. He had no idea why the fuck she thought this, since she had no clue how good he even was in a fight, but considering the probable trauma the kid had gone through, Katsuki decided it wasn't an issue that needed to be pressed right now. Somehow, Eri had gotten away from the yakuza without anyone realizing. And if she wanted to stick around in Katsuki's living room eating his pastries while she started to recover from that, then why the fuck not? Honestly, Katsuki's biggest concern about the situation would have been what his parents would have said if they came home and found her. So, since they were already gone for a month, he couldn't really come up with a good excuse as to why Eri couldn't stick around for the time being. She seemed to sense that, and grinned up at him like she'd already won the argument before he'd even spoken. I can sleep in the fluffy blankets on the couch, and you can cook those things on the side. Croissants. Croissants. Oh, fuck me. Eri giggled again. Thus, Katsuki had to deal with the realization that, at least for the short-term foreseeable future, he was going to have this child under his care. Fucking shit. The first morning after Katsuki had begrudgingly agreed to let Eri remain in his house, he woke up to find her standing in the corner of his bedroom, staring at him. Kid, what the fuck? I made a bed for you on the couch. Eri let out a small giggle, and Katsuki narrowed his eyes, even more creeped out than before. I wanted to see you, to make sure you hadn't left me, Eri admitted. Katsuki squinted at her before checking the time on his phone. 6:12 a.m. It was way too early for this. Creepy little shit, just don't break anything. He let his head flop backwards against the pillow, firmly shutting his eyes and ignoring the child keeping watch over the room. Good night, Eri muttered, as if this was a normal situation, and that was a normal response. Katsuki sighed loudly. Yeah, fucking night-night, or whatever. The first sign that Katsuki was well and truly fucked was the fact that the yakuza were on the morning news. He watched through the breakfast bar window as Overhaul, known crime boss and yakuza affiliate, was shown to be rampaging around Musatafu, constantly asking, Where is she? Eri, who had been in the bathroom when this particular news story came on, walked into the living room and shrieked before scrambling back into the hall and then into the kitchen, where she clutched onto Katsuki's leg. He's looking for me. Don't let him find me, she whimpered into his sweatpants. Katsuki used the remote to switch the TV off and sighed, placing the toast he was buttering onto a plate. Damn it, he couldn't help but mutter, reaching down to pick up Eri with one arm until she was settled on his hip. She turned out to be fine with physical affection, as long as it wasn't skin-to-skin contact, something Katsuki was careful to avoid. His current theory was that she was touch-starved, going by how much she lent into any kind of positive contact he gave her. I was kinda hoping the whole yakuza thing was just you talking shit. Of course, if she was recognizing Overhaul as one of the assholes that would be chasing her down, then the chance of that had just become much, much slimmer. It also meant that Katsuki needed to stop procrastinating and actually deal with this like an adult. He carried Eri back into the living room and put her down in front of the coffee table, leaning through the breakfast bar to grab the plate of toast and putting it in front of her. She poked it, no doubt wondering where the croissants had gone, and then took a bite. Fucking hell. If she was that stoked about the taste of butter and bread, then this child needed help. Katsuki sat down on the couch on the opposite side of the table, looking at her as he tried to pick his words carefully as to not spook her. Oi, kid. Eri looked up at him questioningly, a slice of toast hanging out of the corner of her mouth. You know we can't stay like this forever, right? Admittedly, it was a little embarrassing how long it took for him to remember the dorms. He could come back here for the weekends, but there was no way Aizawa would sign off on him coming home every single night. Not without good reason, anyway. And somehow Katsuki didn't think telling him about Eri would end well right now. But since Eri was still fragile, and wouldn't take well to the news that Katsuki had to leave, a part of him didn't want to tell her, didn't want to give her more reason to panic, and toss her back out into the unknown so soon after she'd found a place she felt safe in. So somehow, Katsuki found himself holding back the information about the dorms, trying to give himself a little more time to figure out something that wouldn't freak the kid out. He'd always been resourceful. Surely, he must be capable of figuring something out before tomorrow, when school started again. Right? Immediately after his words, Eri started to panic, her little head shaking back and forth as her eyes filled with tears. But you said, I don't want to go back, Mr. Man. I didn't say that. Katsuki paused. Did you just call me Mr. Man? His eyes widened in realization. You don't even know my name and you still want to live with me? Well, you never told me. Eri resisted. Katsuki sighed, letting his head drop into his hands. All right, fair enough. My name is Bakugou Katsuki. You can call me Bakugou. Mr. Katsuki, Eri said with a wide grin. Katsuki glared at her with dead eyes. Okay, I actually don't care anymore. Whatever. He shook his head, trying to get back on track. Look, brat, I know you feel safe here, and you don't trust anyone else. But if anyone finds out I have some random kid living in my house, who I have no legal guardianship over, we're fucked. I'll probably get arrested for kidnapping, knowing my luck. And you'll end up in the foster care system, as a sitting duck for the yakuza to come get you. Eri nodded at him seriously, eyes wide. I don't know what any of that means. Right, she was 6. Katsuki sighed again. Okay, I'm going to let you stay here, at least until the whole yakuza thing dies down, and I can safely find another place for you to go. But there will have to be ground rules, okay? Eri nodded eagerly. Ground rules, she repeated, and Katsuki had to hold back a smirk from how adorable it was. Rule number 1, I'm in charge. This is my house, and I'm the one whose life is going to get most likely fucked up when we get caught. So you do as I say, and you trust me. Eri nodded, and he moved on, satisfied. Rule number 2, Mondays to Fridays I have to go to school. He hesitated, thinking, before pushing forward. That means I'll have to leave the house, and you'll be on your own for a few hours. School ends at 3, so I'll be back home at around 3:30. I'll leave you my phone number, and you can call me if you need anything. He added, seeing her nervous face. But my life can't change too much because I'm looking after you. It's too suspicious. I'll leave you food, and you can use the TV, draw, play, or do whatever. But you don't break anything. Don't use anything in the kitchen, don't answer the door, and don't go into my parents' room. Capiche? Capiche, Eri agreed earnestly. Katsuki nodded, not quite knowing what else to say. What else was there to say? He'd already agreed to this. In a way, he was already fucked. At this point, he was just winging it. He would figure out the dorms later. There was no real reason to make Eri think there was a chance he wouldn't come back. He would. He just hadn't figured out the details yet. Eri fiddled with the edge of her shirt, brushing her hair away from her face to finally look up at him and ask, Can we make more cross ants? Katsuki wasn't impressed with her pronunciation, but he decided to push past it and raise a singular eyebrow. Sure, if you want, but I'll have to leave the house to go buy shit from the store to make them. Would you be okay on your own for a few minutes? Eri bit her lip, thinking, before she nodded firmly. For the cross ants. Right, for the croissants. Katsuki rolled his eyes fondly, reaching out to ruffle her hair. This time she leaned into it, and Katsuki smiled. Kage was Katsuki's best friend, or at least he used to be. The issue was, after middle school, he and Katsuki's entire group had been split up by different high schools, leaving them to lead completely separate lives, especially with how busy Katsuki was with all the training and business he had to take care of while being one of the most well-known students at UA High. Kage nowadays found himself going whole months without even getting to see Katsuki in person. Any video calls were usually cut short by ridiculous amounts of homework, or training sessions he'd been dragged off to by his new classmates. It got to the point that not even messaging Izuku could guarantee an update on his friend's whereabouts. And during middle school, that kid pretty much acted like the official Bakugou tracker for the rest of their group. So, when Kage finally spoke to Katsuki during a late-night online study session, he heard that he was planning on spending the entire weekend chilling at home to rest up. Like any best friend, he decided to force his way into the Bakugou house so they could spend time together, just like old times. It's not like it was hard for him to get into Katsuki's house. He'd done it 1,000 times before. All Kage had to do was sneak around the side of the house and shimmy his way up a tree, dropping down into Katsuki's yard and making his way over to one of the windows he knew opened into the main hall. Daiza had broken the lock back when they were 13 and fucking around with a paintball gun Abiko had found, so it was always accessible if you knew the specific way to jimmy it up. Sure, he could knock on the door like a normal person, but what was the fun in that? He fell through the window, jumping up and cleaning up any mess he'd made during his entrance, and snuck carefully into the living room, trying to see if he could find and sneak up on Katsuki. Instead, it was Kage who got the shock. Because instead of his best friend chilling on the couch like he'd expected, he saw a random kid staring at him from in front of the TV, horror on her face. They stared at each other for 3 seconds. The little girl screamed. The store was a 4-minute walk away from his house. Katsuki had been gone for 10 minutes at the most. So why the fuck did he hear a high-pitched scream coming from his house as he walked down the street, shopping bags in hand? Immediately thoughts of the yakuza having tracked down Eri filled his mind, and he dropped his bags onto the sidewalk as he broke out into a sprint, thankful that he lived on a quiet road and it was likely nobody else was around to hear the noise. He bounded up to his front door and didn't bother with the key, blasting the front door open. He ran a few steps into the hall, only to pause, worry being overcome with confusion as instead of a battle scene centered around a terrified child, he saw Kage stood in the entrance of the living room, hands held out in front of him in defense of a screaming child and looking back and forth between Katsuki and Eri with a wildly concerned face. Katsuki's face dropped into one of pure exasperation, swinging the door shut behind him, and ignoring the rattling of a clearly broken frame as he stormed into the living room to calm Eri down. "Who is this, and why is she in your house?" Kage yelled deliriously, as Katsuki got Eri to calm down and come out of the corner she had huddled in, coaxing her to sit back on the couch. "Because I didn't expect your fucking ass to break in and freak the shit out of her," he exclaimed, turning around to gesture wildly at Kage, before Eri reached a small hand up to tug on the edge of his shirt. "Is he going to make me go back to the bad people?" she asked quietly. Kage's already concerned face suddenly became much more expressive. "Katsuki, what the actual fuck?" Katsuki let his head hang back, staring at the ceiling. "I am so fucking tired," he bemoaned. "Why do you have a child? Do I need to call somebody?" "I don't want to be taken away, Mr. Katsuki." "Okay, both of you shut the fuck up," Katsuki finally said, taking a step away so he could breathe. After a moment he gestured to Kage and spoke to Eri. "You're not going anywhere, kid, because he may be a sack of shit, but he isn't a snitch. He'll understand." Kage gave an offended look. Eri didn't seem to understand completely what Katsuki was saying, but she trusted his words enough that she simply nodded, jumping off the couch to duck behind his legs while looking out at Kage curiously. Satisfied with this, Katsuki turned back to the main problem, his middle school best friend. "I know you've got a lot of beef with a lot of random fucking people," Kage said, which Katsuki glared at him for. "And you know I'll back you in a fight, but I draw the line at you kidnapping kids. I'm gonna need you to let the girl go." "Kage, shut the actual fuck up and go get the bags you made me drop outside." "This is some wild shit you've got going on here, Kats." Katsuki looked over the breakfast bar at Kage dryly, watching as his friend scrolled through a news article pertaining to the recent yakuza rampages. "More flour," Eri requested from where she was standing on a chair nestled directly in front of Katsuki. positioned so that he could direct her arms while she used a rolling pin on the pastry laid out on the counter. "What do we say?" Katsuki replied automatically. Eri pouted, leaning her head back up to look at him, little horn brushing his neck. "Please?" "There we go." Katsuki reached into the bag, sprinkling some more flour onto the counter and redirecting Eri's small hands to use the rolling pin correctly. "Didn't you just tell her to shut the fuck up like 5 minutes ago?" Kage asked, not looking up from the phone. "Don't tell me how to raise my child, Kage." "She's been here 1 day." Katsuki rolled his eyes, grin pulling at his lips as he threw a pinch of flour at Kage, and he laughed. "So what, you're just going to keep her here until everything dies down?" he asked, brushing the white powder out of his hair, and Katsuki nodded. "Not much else I can do. She's terrified of adults and doesn't want to leave the house." "What about once things have died down? She can't stay here forever. Are you going to tell your teachers, All Might? What about the dorm—" Katsuki shook his head slightly, tilting his head down at the 6-year-old between his arms in a "not in front of the kid" gesture. Kage nodded in understanding. They'd talk later. "Anyway," Katsuki said, "I wouldn't trust All Might with a dandelion, let alone a kid." Kage leant an elbow on the counter, resting his cheek in the palm of his hand. "Abiko spoke to Deku a few days ago. Said that he and All Might seemed like they were pretty close. And look how that's turning out. He's got more PTSD than he had during middle school." Kage let out a bark of laughter as Katsuki helped Eri finish up with the croissants, deciding to leave the proper conversations for later. Playing Mario Kart had admittedly been a bad idea from the start. Kage suggested it because he thought Eri might enjoy it, and Katsuki agreed to teach her purely to keep her busy for a little while longer. However, due to the idiocy of his friends and admittedly himself, the gaming session quickly turned into less of a relaxing time, keeping the little kid entertained, and more into a death match between the two people attempting to look after her. Although Eri did seem to be a bit entertained. "You cheated!" Eri cheered from her spot on the couch as Kage threw his controller at Katsuki's head, screaming his betrayal. Katsuki ducked away, jumping over the back of the couch and holding an arm up in defense. "How is it cheating to throw a red shell at you? It's part of the game's code, you sore fucking loser!" he yelled back indignantly, a wide grin on his face as he laughed at his friend's pain, accurately represented by the race's replay occurring on the TV. Bowser, Katsuki's character, firmly in first place during the final lap. Bowser Jr., Eri's chosen character that she insisted had to match with Katsuki's, was in 6th place, while Yoshi, Kage, was trailing behind in 11th. Kage jumped up to perch on the back of the couch, and then Eri let out loud peals of laughter as he launched himself off the edge, jumping onto Katsuki with a war cry and tackling him to the ground. "I was so fucking close to winning!" Kage seethed through his laughter. Katsuki, unable to fight the wide grin as they wrestled on the ground, narrowly avoided hitting their heads on the coffee table. "Cap," Katsuki choked out. "Oh shit." As Kage tried to shove his hands over his face, Katsuki jabbed a hand into his ribs and he let out a yelp, quickly being overwhelmed as Katsuki overpowered him with his newly gained upper hand. "Yeah, Mr. Katsuki, fight, fight, fight!" Eri encouraged from the couch, and Katsuki grinned, standing up while keeping a hold of one of Kage's legs, and one of his arms, easily lifting the teenager up into the air sideways as he hung there, laughing. "Fuck, oh fuck, I'm dead!" Kage let himself dangle, dramatically pleading in between his laughs as Katsuki jerked him around slightly, both of them more dedicated to making Eri laugh than they were to actually fighting. "Don't kill me, Mr. Katsuki, I beg you." "Okay, fuck you." Katsuki laughed at the nickname, heaving his old friend to the side before slugging him into an armchair where he fell with a groan, quickly letting out another much more painful groan when Katsuki jumped onto him, his elbow going directly into Kage's stomach. "Mr. Katsuki wins!" Eri exclaimed, delighted, still giggling and clapping as she watched them. Katsuki slid off Kage and chuckled, walking over to the couch to high-five the little girl while his victim recovered. She gave him one, and he inwardly smiled at how quickly she was opening up to physical affection. "Oh, so you think that's a win for Katz?" Kage said between wheezes, trying to catch his breath. "This shit's child's play for Katsuki. Mr. Katsuki over here was kicking villain ass before he was your age," he said to Eri, sending a wink and a smirk to Katsuki, who gave him a dry glare. "Exaggerating," Katsuki claimed, as Eri turned to him with starry eyes. "Don't fill her head with lies." "I'm not exaggerating. She should know how badass you were as a kid. Doesn't she want to know how safe she is staying with you?" Kage pointed out. Eri climbed off the couch, jumping up and down on the spot and waving her little clenched fists around. I do! Katsuki rolled his eyes, going to check on the load of laundry he put on earlier, while Kage started responding. "Okay, let me tell you about when we were 5 years old and our friend Deku got kidnapped, and Mr. Katsuki tracked down their hideout and rescued him all by himself." "Whoa, he really did that?" "Yep, beat up a whole room of bad guys single-handedly. The police showed up and had no idea what to do." "There were only 3 guys, it wasn't that big a deal," Katsuki mumbled to himself defensively as he walked into the washroom. Obviously Kage didn't hear him, and continued with the over-dramatized version of what in Katsuki's opinion was only a tiny incident that was not worth the amount of praise he had gotten at the time. Still, when he walked back into the living area and watched the way Eri stared at him, awe and trust and safety swimming in her eyes, he couldn't help but mention the time he'd stumbled upon a low-tier villain group at 12 and beaten half them up enough that the other half decided to hand themselves over into the police. Kage grinned and gave him a thumbs up from where he was standing behind Eri. Katsuki waited until she was looking away before flipping him off. "So..." Katsuki rolled his eyes, head tilting back to stare at where Kage was sitting on the bottom step of the staircase, watching as he used a small toolkit to fix the lock on the front door. Kage had ended up staying the entire day, helping with dinner and watching with amusement as Katsuki managed to wrangle Eri into an early bedtime. The living area's door was shut now, keeping the house quiet as she slept on the couch while Kage and Katsuki spoke quietly in the dim light of the lamp on the entrance table into the outside porch light, casting Katsuki's shadow across the floor of the hall from where he sat cross-legged in between the open door and the wall. "Keep it down, you're gonna wake the baby," Katsuki joked. Kage snorted. "Okay, Daddy Bakugou." Katsuki choked, making a face as Kage's eyes widened, shock at his own words. "Jesus fucking Christ, Kari!" "Oh my god." Kage giggled, dropping his voice to a low mumble. "That's my bad." "Fuck off," Katsuki snorted, and Kage shook his head. "Okay, but seriously, what's your plan with this? Just let the kid stay?" "What else am I supposed to do?" Katsuki shrugged, fiddling with the door hinges. The warm night air flowed through the open crack and into the hall, occasionally filling the air with the noise of a car driving by. "She needs to feel safe for a while, and she likes it here. There's no way the yakuza could trace her back here. If they had a way to do that, there's no way we would have made it an entire day without any sight of them. At this point, if I bring her back into the public by involving the authorities, it would probably put her in more danger." "So, how long are you gonna let her stay here?" Katsuki hesitated. "I don't fucking know. Long enough for her to be comfortable with her own quirk at least, and to trust whoever I bring in to help her." "She already seems to trust you a lot, to be fair," Kage pointed out. "You were always good with kids." "What? The fuck no I wasn't." Kage snorts. "Yeah, you were. They used to swarm you whenever we'd go past the kindergarten by Aldera." "Okay, well that was only because I'd let them climb all over me while I used my explosion to rocket around the playground. They liked flying, not me." "Nah, man, they felt safe around you. You give off a fucking protector vibe. That's why you were the only one who could get Deku to listen to you during those school trips." Katsuki made a face. "He listened to me because I scared the shit out of him." "Nuh-uh." Kage grinned, shaking his head. "Remember, that scary-ass history teacher that was our chaperone during the zoo trip? and she kept yelling and trying to get Deku to listen to her, but he just shoved his head into that notebook and ignored her. Then you came along, with 3 words, and he was walking along, holding your hand, the politest little 9-year-old on that trip. To be completely fair, Katsuki held up a hand. Those 3 words were, "I'll kill you." Karyaj laughed, before remembering the sleeping child next door and muffling the noise. "Whatever," he whispered. "Seriously though, tomorrow you have to go back to the dorms for the week. What are you going to do with the kid?" Katsuki sighed, letting his arm fall from the door to land limply on his lap, bracing the other on his knee and laying his cheek in his palm. "Well, I've been thinking about it. School ends at 3, and it's not like they literally lock you into UA until the weekend. I can leave, as long as I'm back by 9 p.m. curfew for the dorms. The kid goes to bed at like 8, so I can still go to my classes and come back here, and have enough time to be back here for around 5 hours. Make a dinner, put her to bed, and run back to UA before anyone notices. I can make packed lunches and breakfast shit and leave them in the fridge for her to have while she's here during the day. She grew up in a cell with the yakuza. Being alone in a house for school hours won't be too bad, especially since she can call if she needs anything." "I guess so. But what about during the night? Going to bed with you here and then waking up alone will freak her out a lot, right?" Karyaj asked. Katsuki tilted his head, conceding. "Yeah, been thinking about like a baby monitor or some shit. But the other option..." He trailed off, eyes wandering around the room before settling pointedly on Karyaj. "She seems chill with you, now." Karyaj narrowed his eyes. "You used to break in here in the middle of the night all the time when my parents were gone," Katsuki pointed out. "I used to just wake up with you asleep on the stairs. You spent nights here all the time anyway. Maybe you could come over in the evenings, be here in the mornings to get her up and make sure she eats, and then go off to school. My place is closer to where you go anyway, right? And then I'll be here after school, and you can just drop back at 9 or something." "So I'm babysitting overnight?" "It's just so she isn't alone while she's asleep. If you do that, then I can check up with her whenever a class ends, or I have lunch. Then she'd only really be alone for a few hours a day. That's not so bad. I mean, I was left alone for months on end when I was her age, and I turned out fine." Karyaj winced at him, and Katsuki threw a screw at his forehead. "No, okay, I'm kidding." Karyaj snickered, picking up the screw from where it had bounced off and landed on the step, chucking it lazily back into Katsuki's lap where he picked it back up, so he could screw it back into the door. "Sure, I'll start spending nights here. I don't know if she'll be satisfied with just my protection, though. I'm not her personal hero, like you are." "Fuck off, I haven't even done anything." Katsuki rolled his eyes, swinging the door back and forth to check the hinges were put on correctly, and standing up to shut the door, testing the lock. It seemed to work fine, which he counted as a win, before he turned to Karyaj and his face softened slightly. "Seriously, thank you for helping me out on this." Karyaj gives him a fond look before he grins. "Anytime, Daddy-o." "Okay, you fucked it up." "Oh, like you didn't like being called Daddy? Not even by your childhood best friend?" "This is why I chose to go to a different high school." "Oh, come on, you love me." "No." End of Chapter 2. Be sure to support the author and leave your reactions in the link to the original work. Yes! Karyaj finally entered. He's like MVP of this fic, in my opinion. I love him. I kid you not, when I first started this fic, I had no idea who he was, like, at all. And the tags on relationships were Bakugou Katsuki and Karyaj, Bakugou's friend with the undercut. And I was like, there's no one there who, and I had to look it up, and he's Bakugou's friend with an undercut that appeared in like a singular episode. In canon work, I'm pretty sure he's just an NPC though, which honestly really emphasizes how good of a writer Mentally Papaya is, that Mentally Papaya was able to grab a random NPC and create like an amazing character that was introduced beautifully in this chapter, in my humble opinion. For kicks, I just am going to put it on record that I recorded this in February of 2025, and I wonder what day this is actually going to get published, because I want to finish this entire fic before I start uploading chapters. So we'll see how long it takes me.